it's like an arc movement, so the arms, the elbows stay the same kind of flexion, and you notice she's not kissing the dumbbells together at the top. You don't need to kiss the dumbbells together. What happens if she kisses the dumbbells together is the triceps then start to take the load and there's no pressure on the chest. If you keep a bit of tension on the chest there, gravity's trying to pull outwards, then there's still tension in the area you want to train. So all the way out, still that same arc, good pause at the bottom on stretch, and then breathe out as she comes in. And again, we're still aiming mainly, it's more stress on these clavicular fibres here, the upper chest. But it's more direct than just a pressing movement. Okay. One of the other things which is common in bodybuilding, which we'll go through in some of the problems that and injuries they get, is when the shoulders tend to move into the forward position, or what we call a protracted position, where these muscles in front pull the shoulder into a forward position. You can't engage the chest fully then. So what we tend to do, we tend to encourage them to set up a good base first before they start the exercise. What I usually say to people, while you're in that position, retract the shoulder blades and contract them so you fix your shoulders in that position and then start the exercise. So some people did say this exercise is like hugging a tree, and I always try and avoid that saying, because when you hug a tree you tend to do that and protract. We're trying to keep the shoulders back while she keep the arc for the chest. Okay, so she engages the middle muscles, she's contracting them now, and then she comes out in the arc. So it's important to, if you notice, she's not, as she comes up, she's not pushing the shoulders forward, they're staying back, and it's just the chest that's engaging. Just thought that was an important point. With this one, this is a decline movement, so we're now going to hit, changing from the upper fibres to these, what we call sternocostal fibres, or lower fibres of the chest. So the bench is on a slight decline angle, and what I'm going to do is get it to arch your back, so that's it. And this elevates the chest so that the angle of the pull is just right. It's going to be a flying movement again, so elbows slightly bent, arcing right out, with a good stretch at the bottom, and a pause there, breathing out and driving through. That's it. Deep breath in again. Going right out, elbows slightly bent, pause at the bottom, and drive up. So this is getting the bottom fibres of the chest, the lower chest, this area. I'm going to show you a few exercises from this area. In your routine, you would just pick one of them. Okay. Some people find it difficult to perform this exercise on a decline. They feel like the whole body's sliding down and they can't concentrate. So you can do the same movements on a flat. What I tend to find is that people struggle to arch the back enough, and the idea is to stick the chest out so you get that angle of pull. I usually say to people, wriggle your hips up towards your shoulders. So you wriggle your hips up to your shoulders and you get a bit more of an arch. Okay, and again, you set up your base, so you bring your shoulders back and contract the middle of your back, and then take your arms out, keeping your shoulders where they are. So she's done that now. You can see from the side here, she's got a nice arch and a nice, nice angle of pull through the lower chest. So some people find it more comfortable to do it on the flat, but it's essentially a similar exercise. And I would do that over the bench press. A lot of people ask me, what do you think about the bench press? How should I do the bench press? And I usually say, well, don't do it at all. Better off not doing it at all as a bodybuilder, because it's non-specific. It is a compound movement, but it's non-specific really for the chest. And people get the idea that it's primarily a chest exercise. This next exercise is another exercise that you can utilise for the lower chest. Okay, so it's another one of your options. First of all, I thought it'd be good to demonstrate a bad style and a bad way of doing the exercise. So this is how you tend to see it in gyms. Maybe slightly exaggerated, maybe not. Okay, take it away, John. So you see how loose and sloppy that movement is. Okay, there's a lot of muscles being involved in there. We really want to isolate the chest, which is his shoulders, his back, his hips, everything but his chest. So we want to kind of refocus now. I'm going to do it the correct manner. This is the way that we prefer to do it to isolate the chest. You notice he's using a bench behind him, and that's like a fixed fulcrum, so that's a fixed point for which he can direct the movement. You notice the other good thing he's doing is he's getting a good stretch and a good pause, and he's not protracting his shoulders like you see a lot of people do. He's keeping his shoulders back, he's engaging the chest is stuck out. And with this movement, because there's still tension on the inner range, he can bring the stirrups together. So unlike the dumbbells where you just stop short of clasping them together, this one you can really work towards squeezing them together. And like I asked Charlotte to do with the last exercise, you engage the back muscles first, bring the shoulders back into a retracted position before you engage the chest. So it's shoulders back, engage, and then squeeze in. And that's what he's doing there. So everything's strict, he's got a pause at the end of the movement, there's still tension on the muscle, he's not using momentum, he's isolated his chest as hardly any other muscles are involved. He's sat down, so he's taking the pressure off his core and everything. You know, a lot of people think, oh, you should strengthen your core, but with bodybuilding, it's all about isolation and strengthening and improving the muscles that you want to develop and missing out the ones that you don't want to develop. So it's all about, more about isolation. Now this last exercise could be an additional one, so you could choose 2 exercises out of the last 2 groups, a pressing movement with a flying movement, and then this could be an additional exercise. This particular machine was developed by Nautilus. The guy who invented Nautilus was a guy called Arthur Jones. He was a bioengineer. He was an expert at working out strength curves, so how the muscle functioned at a particular time during the curve and how best to generate the right force at the right time. He devised these D-shaped cams, which these machines utilise. So he was very innovative in his time in the 70s, and his machines are very much overlooked now, but they still apply and they're still really, really good biomechanically. So this is one of these machines. You don't see many of these. This is an incline flying machine, and as you can see, it takes the grip out of the equation. There's no balance. The movement is a nice arcing movement. It's a flying movement, but you actually engage in the crook of the arm rather than holding on to something. You hook it around the crook of the arm, so you don't have to grip anything. And it's very direct on the chest, so we'll demonstrate that now. So again, palms facing one another, and with this particular movement, as you squeeze in, it still offers resistance on the inside part of the movement, so what we call the inner range is still developed. So it's something that dumbbells can't give you really. You can actually focus on the inner range, which is that final contraction of the chest, what we call the sternal fibres. And the dumbbells don't give you that, so it's a good addition to do with the dumbbells. So you could do a pressing movement, an incline fly movement, and then you could finish off with this one. You could also use it as a good stretch, so you can take it right out. You could use the full range of the movement, so it'll really stretch right down. So it's still offering a lot of resistance there, and you could do a full range movement if you wanted, or you could focus just on that inner range on this exercise. So it's useful for that. So that completes chest really. So you choose a pressing movement, a flying movement, and then for this time a movement to engage the inner range. So that's a typical chest routine, which incorporates free weights and machines. Moving on to tricep work now, and so as the word suggests, the tricep is a 3-headed muscle. Okay, so if we look on the chart here, we've got the medial head, the lateral head, and the long head running right through. Now these 2 heads here, this one, medial head attaches to the humerus here, the lateral head attaches to the humerus high up, but the long head continues right over to attach on underneath the back of the shoulder. So the long head is quite unique in that it works over 2 joints. It works over the shoulder joint and the elbow joint. And to be often, to be honest, it's overlooked in a lot of gyms. You don't see many overhead tricep movements in a gym, and you need to really stretch that muscle fully overhead. So you're stretching the long head down there in that kind of position to maximise its contraction and its development over its long axis. And you don't see many overhead tricep movements. The other two heads, shorter heads, they'll develop on shorter movements. So what I tend to suggest is with a tricep routine is if you do an overhead movement for the long head, and if you do a mid-position movement for basically all three heads but incorporating the long head, and then you do a push-down movement, then you've more or less solved the whole problem of hitting all three heads. There are some compound movements for triceps which kind of double up as chest exercise as well, things like dips. I tend to overlook them. I'm not saying they're no good, but they're not really that isolating. And then you've also got exercises like a close grip tricep press, which I think is useful. It does engage the shoulder, the chest and the triceps, but in certain parts of the movement you get a really strong contraction of the triceps, so that's useful for all three heads, especially the lateral head. We'll talk about the advantages and disadvantages as we go through each exercise. So if you pick out, basically for your tricep program, a push-down movement, a horizontal kind of pressing movement, and then an overhead movement, you've more or less covered all bases there. So we're going to start off with a push-down movement. With the push-down movements here, elbows tucked into the side, blocking out. You notice she's using a cambered bar. Now the reason for that is if you use a flat bar, if I rotate my hands down like that, there's a little muscle on the inside of the elbow which tends to get overused and stressed and tight. So it's a little pronator muscle. And we get quite a lot of people, bodybuilders in, who tend to stress that muscle. If you open the angle up slightly, it takes the pressure off the elbow, inside the elbow, but you can still generate the pressure through the triceps. So can you see the tricep up in there, yeah? So she's coming up to just past horizontal, past 90 degrees. Pause at the top. Notice the body's fixed forward slightly but not moving, and all the tension's on the triceps. Okay, so a full lockout, controlled on the way up, pause, and then drive out. Breathing technique will be deep breath in on the way up, pause, and breathe out on the way down. Always breathe out on the hardest part of the movement on the way out. This is an example of a horizontal line of pull. So using a pulley again, and you can see he's using a rope, nice and comfortable for the tricep. And this tends to engage all three heads, but you've still got a pretty good stretch on the long head. So he's taking it back behind his head there, pausing, and then pushing out. He's got one leg in front of the other, trying to keep a good base of support. His body's still. But with John, because he's got really strong triceps, if we put the weight up to the load that he'd need to improve his triceps, it would we'd need to brace him here. He'd tend to pull him back. So if you've got a training partner, you can brace him in that position like that. So, and it just gives him something extra, a base to push against. And so if you've got a trainer, if you're training on your own, it's difficult. You can probably put your foot behind you or try and brace yourself a bit harder. This exercise again is another horizontal based tricep exercise, but